You are born already condemned, not because of anything you've done, not because of a war you fought or a crime you committed. You are condemned the moment you take your first breath, in a mud brick hut on land that used to belong to your ancestors, land that now belongs to a man you will never meet, in a city you are forbidden to enter without permission, under laws written by people who have decided, permanently, that you are less than human. This is Messenia, in the shadow of Sparta. And if you are born here in these centuries, you are not a citizen. You are not even, in the eyes of the law, fully a person. You are a helot. And by the end of this video, you will understand why historians still argue that Sparta, the city we're taught to admire for its discipline and its warriors, built that entire admirable reputation on top of one of the most calculated systems of terror the ancient world ever produced. If stories like this are the reason you keep coming back to this channel, do me a favor and hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me which country you're watching from. I genuinely love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's go back to the beginning. To understand what it meant to be a helot, you have to understand what Sparta was before the helots existed, because Sparta wasn't always the militarized machine we picture. In the 8th century BC, Sparta was simply one more ambitious city-state in the Peloponnese. Hungry for farmland it didn't have enough of, Messenia had that farmland. Rich, fertile, well-watered. Everything Sparta's own rocky territory lacked. So Sparta did what a lot of ancient powers did when they wanted what their neighbor had. They took it by force. The First Messenian War, then decades later the Second, ground the Messenian people down through siege, famine, and battlefield defeat. And when the fighting was finally over, Sparta didn't just take the land. They kept the people who lived on it, and made a decision that would define the next 400 years of Spartan society. They wouldn't sell the Messenians off as slaves to be shipped elsewhere, the way most Greek cities handled conquered populations. Instead, they'd keep them exactly where they were, farming the exact same land. Except now that land technically belonged to individual Spartan citizens, and the Messenians who worked it would hand over a fixed share of everything they grew, forever, generation after generation, with no path out. This is the detail that should stop you cold. A helot wasn't owned by a person. A helot was owned by the state, which meant no single Spartan master could free you, sell you somewhere better, or show you mercy that mattered. Your condition was law, not preference. And law doesn't get tired. Law doesn't die. Law outlives everyone who enforces it. By some ancient estimates, helots outnumbered actual Spartan citizens by as much as 7 to 1. Let that sink in for a second, because it's the single fact that explains everything that comes next. Sparta wasn't a confident, secure society lording power over a small, manageable underclass. Sparta was a tiny ruling minority, permanently and correctly terrified of the much larger population they were standing on top of. And a frightened ruling class doesn't govern through confidence. It governs through fear-enforced, deliberate, engineered fear. That fear had a name. Picture a boy born into this world. Let's call him, because no individual helot voice survives to name him for us, Timon. Not a real recorded person, but a composite drawn from what we know actually happened to people in his position, generation after generation. Timon doesn't remember a before. His father worked this land. His father's father worked this land. From the moment he can walk, he's in the fields. Not because anyone's cruel enough to force a toddler to labor, but because there is no other version of childhood available to him. The wheat needs planting, the olives need tending. A fixed portion goes to Sparta, whether the harvest is good or catastrophic. And if it's catastrophic, that's a problem that belongs entirely to Timon's family, not to Sparta. He grows up understanding something most children never have to learn so early, that his life has a ceiling built into it before he was born. He can be strong, he can be clever. He can work harder than any Spartan citizen ever will, because Spartan citizens are explicitly forbidden from doing manual labor. Their entire society is structured so citizens can train for war full-time, which only works because people like Timon are doing the farming that feeds them. None of that effort will ever change his legal status. There is no reward tier for a good helot. There is only survival and the absence of punishment. And then Timon turns roughly 18, 19, the age Spartan sources call the edge of manhood, and he learns about the krypteia. Here's what ancient writers, particularly Plutarch, tell us. Once a year the Spartan magistrates, the ephors, would formally declare war on the helots, not symbolically. Actually ritually legally declare war on an entire population living inside their own territory. Why? because under Spartan religious law, killing another person brought ritual pollution, unless that person was, officially, an enemy in wartime. This yearly declaration was a loophole. It meant any Helot killed in the year that followed carried no guilt, no consequence, no crime. Into that loophole stepped groups of young Spartan men, the krypteia, sent out armed, in secret at night, into the countryside where Helots lived. Their task, according to the ancient sources, was to watch, to identify Helots who seemed too strong, too capable, too much like potential leaders of a future revolt, and to kill them in the dark, then disappear before dawn. I want to be straight with you here. Historians today do debate how literally and how often this happened, versus how much it functioned as a deliberate rumor. Sparta wanted spreading through Helot villages. Either way, the terror it created was real, because nobody in Timon's village could know for certain whether tonight was a krypteia night. Imagine living your entire adult life not knowing whether your strength was an asset or a death sentence. Imagine training your body to work land and understanding at the same time that being visibly capable could get you killed by boys barely older than you, acting entirely within the law. This is the psychological architecture Sparta built, and it's worth pausing on, because it explains something modern viewers often miss about Spartan society. We're taught to admire Spartan discipline as if it existed in a vacuum. It didn't. That discipline, that famous military culture, that entire way of life where citizens did nothing but train for war, all of it was only possible because an entire underclass was being terrorized into producing the food and absorbing the labor that freed Spartan men to become full-time soldiers. The Spartan war machine wasn't built despite the Helots. It was built directly on top of them. There was, technically, one narrow path towards something resembling freedom, and it tells you almost everything you need to know about how little Sparta actually intended to honor it. In moments of military desperation, and Sparta had several, especially during long wars when they needed more soldiers than their shrinking citizen population could supply, the state would offer certain Helots the chance to fight, serve in battle, survive, and earn a semi-free status as what's called a neodamodes, literally, newly of the people, not a full citizen, not equal, but no longer technically enslaved. It sounds, on the surface, like an opportunity. What happened at Thucydides' records is almost impossible to read as anything other than a warning. During the Peloponnesian War, Sparta once asked for Helots who had distinguished themselves through military service. The bravest, the most capable, the ones who had proven their loyalty and skill beyond question, to come forward so the state could formally recognize and free them. Roughly 2,000 stepped forward. Every single one of them disappeared. Thucydides writes that no one ever discovered how each one specifically died. The implication ancient historians have drawn from this for centuries is stark. Sparta identified precisely the Helots most capable of leading a future rebellion, the strong, the battle-tested, the ones other Helots would follow, and eliminated them, under the exact cover of a reward that was supposed to be their escape. If that account is accurate, and even ancient readers understood it as chilling, it means the one official path out of slavery Sparta ever offered was, in its most documented use, actually a trap for identifying threats. Not a door, a filter. Not every day was the krypteia, not every year saw disappearances. Most of Timon's life, like most Helot lives, would have been the exhausting, unglamorous rhythm of agricultural labor, under a system designed to extract just enough from him to sustain Sparta while leaving just enough for his family to survive and reproduce the next generation of laborers. Helots weren't only farmers. Some worked as household servants inside Spartan homes, others as craftsmen, others accompanied Spartan armies on campaign as attendants and support labor, carrying supplies, tending equipment, sometimes even fighting when the state's need outweighed its fear. There's evidence some Helots were permitted small degrees of personal property, even minor prosperity relative to each other, which created its own quiet hierarchy inside a population that Spartan citizens outside viewed as entirely undifferentiated. And there were moments, rare, dangerous, remembered, when the fear Sparta had engineered didn't stay contained. In 464 BC, a massive earthquake devastated Sparta itself, killing a significant portion of the citizen population and leaving the city physically shattered. The Helots, sensing the moment, rose in open revolt. What followed became known as the Third Messenian War. Helot fighters holding out for close to a decade against Spartan forces, entrenched in the mountain stronghold of Mount Ithome, refusing to break even as Sparta called in allied support from across Greece to crush them. They eventually negotiated a surrender, safe passage out of the Peloponnese rather than annihilation, and thousands of Messenian Helots left as free people for the first time in generations, resettled by Athens in the town of Naupactus. It's one of the only moments in this entire story with something close to a victory in it. Most Helots never got that chance. They lived, worked, feared, and died inside the same system their great-grandparents had been born into, with no earthquake, no revolt, no negotiated exit. Here's the uncomfortable thing this story leaves you with. We remember Sparta for the 300 at Thermopylae, for the discipline, for the myth of the perfect warrior society. What we don't put on posters is that this perfect society required a permanent underclass 7 times its own size, kept in line through annual ritual terror, disappearances with no explanation, and a hierarchy so rigid that even bravery in battle couldn't reliably buy your way out of it. Every empire, every golden age we admire in hindsight is standing on someone's labor. Sparta's just happened to write the terror part down. If this changed how you think about Sparta, hit like, subscribe if you haven't, and let me know in the comments. Do you think the krypteia was really as widespread as ancient writers claimed? Or was it mostly a story Sparta wanted spreading? And tell me which forgotten society you want me to dig into next.